Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. I am your host. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Kristin Nichols. Kristin Nichols is the founder of Nichols Higher Education. Kristin, welcome to the show.
So much for having me, Chris.
So Kristin and I met a couple of weeks ago. I heard her on a podcast on the demographic enrollment cliff, and this is what the episode is going to be about. But first, as always, we do a little bit of an intro. So Kristin, I know you have a master's degree in higher education, and you've worked in the higher ed marketing and admissions industry for about 20 years. And you recently founded your agency after working for higher institutions in the Northeast for a while. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you chose to dedicate your career to higher ed.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It sort of happened by accident. I attended Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts out in the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts and had an overwhelmingly positive academic and social experience there. I graduated in 2001 with a degree in communications, and at the time just felt that working at a college would suit my needs, and that's something I wanted to pursue. And while I'm not a first generation student myself, I do come from a rural town in Massachusetts. I grew up in a quiet area from a working class family, and many of my friends at MCLA were first generation. And I understand the nuances that they had to navigate as first gen students. But I decided to start my career in higher ed back in 2001 as an admission counselor, and had traditional admission roles down in DC at the Catholic University of America and up in the Boston area, first at Northeastern. And that was really a transformative experience. Northeastern had just broken into the top 100 national universities with U.S. News and World Report when I started there. And it was a phenomenal place to learn about higher education and the industry. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. Northeastern was also one of probably the first universities at the time in 2007 to have an enrollment marketing team. And while I wasn't on that team, I watched that team and I saw their work. It piqued my interest, and I realized that enrollment marketing aligned my undergraduate degree with higher education. And I made the pivot to enrollment marketing, first in a hybrid role at Bentley University, and then in full marketing roles at UMass Lowell, and more recently, UMass Chan Medical and Bryant.
Yeah, so you are the right person to talk about the enrollment cliff with your enrollment background. So like I mentioned earlier, that a little bit of background that you will be part of the 2024 Cascade User Conference. And to keynote that conference, we'll have a roundtable discussion on the demographic enrollment cliff. But there are so many different angles how to, attack the demographic enrollment cliff and how to kind of balance the scale of the lack of traditional age students that are going to come starting 2025. So we could talk about, non-traditional students, we could talk about international students, but you told me that the largest growth potential lies in first generation students. So we'll talk about that and how to market to first generation students going forward? If you are like a small college or a medium-sized college, we all know that these big universities, University of Miami or Notre Dame, they may not have an issue with the enrollment, but the smaller schools are the ones that are going to suffer. So let's just talk about a little bit about the audience to understand it. So how do the backgrounds of first generation students differ from traditional age students, and how should marketing address some of these differences?
Yeah. So as a group, first generation students are just managing more, in their day-to-day lives. Many are supporting their families and loved ones. I once worked for a university where we did market research, and we asked students what was their major social activity outside of the classroom. And it was a university with a large first gen population. The number one thing that students did outside the classroom was a job. So we have to realize as an industry that there's a financial support system on the student. People are relying on them financially. Many of them are parents to dependent children. So not all of them, but this is another thing that you need to take into consideration when you're talking about the values of the university or college you're working for. Everyone boasts their ROI, right? That's just what we do. We love to, proudly display, look at the ROI that we can give you, but we skip over the student experience often. And first generation students need to be recognized where they are as a prospect. So we shouldn't frog leap over the ROI straight to ROI. We need to talk about the student experience, the support system offered, and what the journey is going to be like for these students as they work towards a degree. They're also students for a longer period of time typically. So it might not be the traditional 4-year. It might trend more towards that national average of 6. And they're more susceptible to withdrawing because of financial constraints. So universities need to talk about how they stay engaged with students for the long haul. Not just showcasing the success stories after graduation, but storytell about the first gen student who's managing so much in their personal lives while also working on a meaningful research opportunity or partnering with a faculty member and having that engaging personal experience. It's that nurture aspect of the student experience that they need. That's where they're going to find comfort, right? And we need to make them as comfortable as possible so they can understand the value of the institution they're looking at. There's nothing wrong with celebrating wins, and we should all do that. That's what we should do as marketers. But there's a real value in talking about the day-to-day. And we shouldn't forget that some of these students are housing and food insecure. So that's another aspect. It shouldn't be in the forefront, but don't forget about that. Do you have support on your campus for those students who may have shelter or food insecurity?
Yeah, it's one of those sad stories, you don't want to particularly tell, but it's important because those are the students that are coming to your institutions, especially when you're a community college, one of those that gets you off the ground. I went to a community college, and when I enrolled at university at the age of 30, was first generation student on my mom's side of the family, and coming from Germany as an international, I had to work to make ends meet and then go to the university. But also that the messaging on social media platforms from the particular college, they were always talking about, oh, hey, between 10 and noon, we're having a booth here at on the campus floor with free T-shirts and free food. But I never made it because I was obviously working during that time. I went to college at 6 p.m. from 6 to 9:30. So there was nothing there, right, for those sort of students. So you always kind of felt left out. And this is where the belonging part of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging comes in, right? Because people like us may not feel like we belong because we're not the traditional type that is constantly catered to and talked about. So it's very important to also make sure that these sort of students feel like they are part of the school, so they don't withdraw. Can you talk about some specific messaging strategies that have proven during your time at working at a university to first generation students? How are these different than the traditional marketing approaches?
Absolutely. First, we need to remember that oftentimes first generation students, not always, but often they're not native English speakers. So starting with what are the cultures in your immediate community that you need to embrace and learn more about? Many of these first generation students come from cultures where the family is heavily involved with the admission process. Even if they're not paying for it, the student is financially responsible. The family still wants to feel included. So what does that look like for the cultures that are in your immediate area that you're going to be recruiting? Audit your digital and physical communications that, around enrollment marketing. Which ones should be translated into different languages? It doesn't have to be the full suite, but which ones need to either be crafted, or if you have them already developed, do they need to be translated into different languages? A virtual tour is a great first step. If your virtual tour is only in English right now as an institution, I challenge you to find other languages to have your digital experience and virtual tour in different languages, and you work with your town and city officials to get to know the immediate cultures if you're not doing so already. I worked at an institution located in a city with an enormous Cambodian population. Khmer is the native language of Cambodia, so it just made sense for us to put a virtual tour up there with English, Spanish, and Khmer as the language options, and make the wise decision to do that, and whatever the languages are in your immediate area.
Yeah, 100%. Know your audience, know your direct audience, and know the community that you're a part of. I love that. And that is very interesting, that Khmer. I never heard of that language before, but that must have been also pretty. I mean, if you have people in the community that you should have folks you may want to hire on, even if it's just part-time, to help with the language barrier there. And you can also utilize AI. Of course, don't fully rely on it, but you can have some copy created through ChatGPT. So I'm a native German speaker, and sometimes I put something that I wrote in English and put it in ChatGPT and ask it to translate it into German, and it is by far better than Google Translate. So even if you have a rough draft and you want to give it to a native speaker and say, hey, does this look right? Would this resonate with our key target audience from Cambodia? That's one way to go about it as well, I would say. But you talked about barriers a little bit too, and education barriers, because one of your fellow Cascade User Conference presenters, her name is 𝐬𝐭 Nichols, and she is going to present on a topic that's near and dear to her heart. It's called Your Content, the Most Ignored Barrier on Higher Education, where she talks about how we have to write in a way that people understand, not on an academic level, but more on a 7th through 8th grade reading level. So talk about a little bit, in your experience, what some of the barriers for first generation students are in facing higher ed, or trying to get into a higher ed institution, and how can targeted marketing directly address these challenges? I know that you just mentioned that it may not be their first language, not always, but sometimes. So is there some content that may be tailored in a way that's more easily digestible for them?
Yes. We keep hearing how expensive higher education is, and it's not worth it. That's not news to any of us, right? Is higher education worth it? Not really. That's kind of the sentiment out there right now. So as a consumer, we need to make the value easy to digest for the prospect. We need to get them comfortable immediately, or we're going to lose the audience. So we need to expose them to the support structure available at each institution. And what does that look like for a first-gen student? It should be one of the first messages out the gate once the prospect enters the system. Here's the support services we offer for students. You're not doing this alone. That needs to be the message, full stop. Just have that conversational tone that you understand that they're the first one in their family to look at and apply to school, and that they may not know anyone personally who can help them through the process, but that as an institution, you're there and you're going to help them, and you're going to see them through all the way to the end, and once they're enrolled, and then all the way through to graduation. And, show them what a degree in their chosen field will provide them with, and what a loan repayment structure will look like. Think of it the same way you would, tackle purchasing a home or a car. It's not necessarily that big dollar amount. It's the monthly payment, right? What is it going to look like month over month, and for how long are you going to have to repay that? And contrast that with, and here's what it would look like if you didn't get this degree. That kind of demonstrates the ROI long term. And the sticker price isn't as scary to the student if you break it down. So empower them. And this must be developed closely with your student life and enrollment teams. This can't be something that marketing does in a vacuum. This is something where roundtable discussions with different leadership and stakeholders across the institution who are actually laser focused on enrollment and student success can work with you to craft the messages that are authentic.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Never work in silos, always work in a cohesive unit towards a common goal. And I like the way you frame this too. You always see the big sticker items, people walking away from university with $100,000 in debt and they only make $50,000 or something like that. Those horror stories. But if you break it down, like you said, into monthly payments, and then also over the lifetime, the how much more a college graduate earns compared to a non-college graduate, that'll be enticing, and that'll open the eyes of those prospective students to see, hey, right now this looks really scary, but in the long run, this is going to be really beneficial and will help you get promotions as well along the way if you put in the effort after you graduate. But we talk a lot about the theories of communication, but how do you actually push that out, right? How important are digital platforms like social media and website in reaching these first generation students, and what are some of the best practices on these platforms?
Yeah. Social media is step one, right? So get the reels, get the stories out there, demonstrating a life, a day in the life of the first gen student. Don't always skew 18 to 22 either, right? Chris, you're a perfect example of this. You've lived this life. So yes, 18 to 22-year-olds are still the traditional, and we shouldn't forget them. But we also need to showcase first gen and older students who are a day in the life on the campus. What are they doing? What are they doing when they're not in the classroom? Be authentic. We know that Gen Z wants authenticity, so just show it for what it is. And it doesn't have to be doom and gloom, but you don't have to sugarcoat it either. Just say, this is what we're juggling, and this is how we're supporting, and this is the day-to-day. And, that is really important. As far as other digital platforms, certainly we need to go back to the different communities in the area and find out where are students spending their time digitally, right? And what cultural types of websites are they visiting? What are they engaging with? What types of platforms? And then tailor your digital advertising to, display on those types of places, and measure it to see if it's actually working and giving you traction and movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep measuring, see if there's movement. What happens if, let's say, you have 4 platforms, right? And one of them does not perform? You're just throwing it on there because, you have it, would you say just walk away from it and don't spend any more time on a certain platform? Let's say Facebook no longer works for you guys and it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook people aren't going to Facebook, but it's still the parent platform. So I would never tell anyone pull off Facebook completely. People are still visiting there. They're just not staying, they're not engaging as long. While I wouldn't say spend most of your efforts there, I wouldn't pull out completely. There is value in having, some exposure on Meta in Facebook.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about community engagement a little bit, demographic enrollment cliff. There's going to be a shift in the demographics, and some of these demographics, some of these cultures, they are more community based, right? So can you discuss the role of community engagement in marketing to first generation students? And do you have specific examples that some successful ones that you've seen in the past?
Yeah, so marketing needs to work closely with the communications and arm as well. So, what are you doing in community relations and government relations, and how are you celebrating different communities within your area? And then marketing can go ahead and properly display those celebrations. So it's not just about the students who are there, who are first gen, and the different cultures that they come from, but working with the community at large to understand first gen students is step one, talk to the local communities, and then engage them in conversation on campus, hire them on your staff, but then do things like, some things that a highly first gen institution I worked for demonstrated was a Portuguese photography exhibit. We had a large Portuguese community, a Southeast Asian cultural celebration, Latin music demonstrations and concerts. And then this is just candy and for marketers to just take out, write stories about them because the engagement is there. People come to these events, they're excited about them. You can put them in a variety of different digital and print publications, and they're visually displayed perfectly, and the story kind of tells itself. So keep doing that. Keep engaging. Keep bringing these people to campus. Your campus doesn't stop right at the end of the physical, barrier of campus. It should bleed out into the community as much as possible, and work with the community.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. I love that they put this on these shows, to have that cultural aspect that these first generation students are so used to, that builds trust if you implement it into your own ecosystem of the university. I always like to say social proof is the best proof,
Yes.
especially in marketing. So let's talk about success stories and representation. How effective is using success stories of current and former students, first generation students, in marketing materials, and why is that so important?
It's students need to see themselves in students who they identify with, right? So it is the bedrock of enrollment marketing communications, and we know this. So first gen students need to see students at every point in their degree process. From I'm not sure this is what I want to do, but I'm going to fill out an RFI form and see where it takes me, all the way through to graduation, and having that story structure, right? And that communication plan where you hit the student over a period of time with different student stories, it is hugely beneficial. And if you aren't doing that, you need to start doing it now, and you need to build out a communication plan that demonstrates first generation students at every single point in their journey. And that's going to make the prospective student feel better, not feel overwhelmed about the process, and not feel like a degree is unattainable.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So let's talk about, at the end of the day, marketers, we have to show success for our efforts. Yeah. What are some of the metrics or indicators that you suggest institutions should measure to see if their communication was effective towards non-traditional students?
So, customize your communication plan and then focus your, use data-driven metrics available in the CRMs and web analytics and social analytics, et cetera, right? That's just stuff, we all know that. So take a look at the data specific to your first-gen communications and pieces. But anecdotal conversations are vital as well. Stopping someone in the hall on your way to a meeting to ask them how things are going, and maybe just tuck away what they tell you for a future conversation is important. Don't forget about the value of just stopping and talking with your colleagues. Focus group, first generation students, student success support staff, and faculty at least annually, to see how things are going and to overlap that with the digital analytics so that you can really get a good story and see if things are effective, and you can tailor your communications and put more weight behind the communication pieces that are working.
Yeah. Let's look to the future. With the demographic shift in higher education, what are some of the trends that, AI is big right now, but what are some of the trends that institutions should be aware of when marketing to first generation students going forward, and how to adapt quickly to these changes?
Yeah. We can't forget about the traditional college student, but I urge us as an industry to realize that the definition of traditional college student is changing. And we need to define what the traditional college student in 2024 is, and embrace that change and that new definition fully. So yes, AI is completely changing everything, and we need to change with it. There's so much to learn around that, but enrollment is changing. The age of the student is changing. The challenges that the student faces are changing. So I think as an industry, we need to take a step back and say, what are we doing, and is it still working? And are we defining things correctly for 2024? And that's something I'd like to see in us really shape in the next 12 months.
That's good. Take a step back, see if what we're doing is still working, and avoid saying that's just how we've always done it. It's the most important thing to look forward. So let's say somebody's walking through the beautiful downtown area of Boston, Massachusetts, and you just so happen to be there, and they see you and they say, hey, Kristin, what is one piece of advice you would give me to create a more meaningful connection with my first generation students?
You have to start where they are, and you have to identify who they are as a student. It's not a one size fits all. Choose a friendly approach, right? Be their partner and their ride shotgun with them the entire way. That's the type of tone that will win them over and make them feel more comfortable with the process overall. And reassure them that you're going to be there every step of the way, that their success is your success.
That is rich. That is so rich and so relevant as well. Kristin, I don't want the conversation to stop here. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about you and ask you some more questions?
Oh, thanks, Chris. I'm on LinkedIn. So Nichols Higher Education or Kristin Nichols, you can find me on LinkedIn, and happy to engage with anyone there if they shoot me a message or want to connect.
Very good. Thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. If you enjoyed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends in your network. And if you have a moment, I would really appreciate a review of the podcast. That'll help other people find the show as well. Tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. when I release another episode. Take care now. Have a good one, friends.